Guy de Maupassant Allouma. One of my acquaintances once said to me, if, while traveling through Algeria, you happen to find yourself near Bourja-Baba, pay a visit to my old friend Obal. He's settled there as a colonist. I forgot both Obal's name and the exact location of Ababa, and never gave that colonist another thought, until pure chance led me to his doorstep. For nearly a month, I had been wandering on foot through that magnificent land stretching from Algiers to Churchill, Orleansville, and Tiaret, a land at once forested and bare, majestic and enchanting. Between the mountain ridges, dense pine woods nestle in narrow ravines, where torrents boil and foam in winter. Giant trees, fallen across the gorges, serve the Arabs as bridges. Lianas coil around dead trunks, adorning them with living shoots. In hidden folds of the mountains, ravines of breathtaking beauty open up, and streams meander along gentle banks overgrown with oleanders. Everything is steeped in ineffable charm. But the sweetest memory of that journey, etched forever in my soul, was the evening hikes along forest paths, winding over undulating slopes high above the vast, tawny, hilly plains stretching from the blue sea to the chain of the Warsenes Mountains, whose peaks are crowned with the cedar forests of Tiniatelhad. That day I lost my way. I had just climbed a summit and saw before me, beyond the ridges, the vast lowlands of Matidja, and farther still, on the crest of another range, barely visible in the distance, a strange monument known as the Christian woman's tomb, said to be the ancestral burial site of the Moorish caliphs. I began descending the southern slope. Ahead, all the way to the mountains rising into the clear sky at the edge of the desert, lay a plain, hilly, undulating and ruddy, so ruddy it seemed as though all its hills were covered and stitched together lion skins. Here and there, a mound rose, tall, sharp, and yellow, like the shaggy hump of a camel. I walked briskly, with that lightness one feels when descending a mountain path. Nothing burdens you during these swift passages through fresh mountain air, neither body, nor heart, nor thoughts, nor cares. In that moment, I was free from everything that weighs down and torments our lives, feeling only the joy of rapid descent. In the distance, I could make out Arab encampments, dark, pointed tents clinging to the ground like sea snails to rocks, and gerbies, shelters woven from branches with wisps of gray smoke rising from them. White figures, men and women, wandered slowly about, and the bells of grazing herds tinkled faintly in the evening air. Along the path, I passed berbera bushes, bent low under the weight of crimson berries strewn across the road. They seemed like martyr trees, weeping blood, their branches dripping with scarlet fruit like drops of gore. The earth around me was spattered with this bloody rain, as if after torture, and as I crushed the berries underfoot, I left behind the traces of a killer. At times, I would pluck the ripest ones and eat them as I walked. The valleys were veiled in pale mist, rising slowly like steam from oxen's flanks. And above the mountain chain that marked the horizon at the edge of the Sahara, a biblical sky blazed. Long golden streaks alternated with crimson ones. Blood again, blood and gold, the whole history of mankind. And between them, now and then, a narrow opening revealed a greenish-blue expanse, infinitely distant like a dream. Oh, how far I was from all the people and all the affairs of Paris. How far from myself. For I had become a wanderer, a creature without thoughts or burdens, a roving eye that moves, observes, marvels. And even farther I was from my intended route, which I had completely forgotten, for as night fell, I realized I was lost. Darkness fell upon the earth like a heavy downpour, and I could no longer distinguish anything ahead of me but endless ridges of mountains. Somewhere below, in the valley, tents appeared. I descended and tried to ask the first Arab I met which direction led to my road. Did he understand the meaning of my words? I couldn't tell. He spoke at length, gesturing and explaining, but I grasped nothing. In despair, I was already preparing to spend the night wrapped in my cloak beside the Arab encampment, when suddenly, amid the stream of unfamiliar words, I thought I caught the name Borgia Baba. I repeated, Borgia Baba? Yes, yes. I showed him 2 francs, a fortune. He set off ahead, and I followed. Oh, how long I walked through the impenetrable night behind that pale phantom, who ran barefoot along the stony paths where I kept stumbling. Suddenly, a light flickered. We approached the gates of a white house, resembling a fortified post, with blank walls and no windows facing outward. I knocked. Dogs barked in the courtyard. A voice asked in French, "Who's there?" I replied, "Does Monsieur Aubal live here?" "He does." The door opened, and I found myself face to face with Monsieur Aubal, a tall, fair-haired man of imposing build with a kindly face, wearing house slippers and a pipe in his mouth. I introduced myself. He extended both hands to me, saying, "Make yourself at home, sir." A quarter of an hour later, I was dining with appetite, seated across from my host, who never once removed his pipe. I knew his story. Having squandered a considerable fortune on women, he had invested the remainder in Algerian land and devoted himself to cultivating vineyards. The venture had succeeded. He lived happily and truly looked like a man content with his fate. I couldn't understand how this Parisian, this former bon vivant, had grown accustomed to such a monotonous existence in complete solitude, and I began to question him. "How long have you been here?" "9 years now." "And you never feel the pangs of loneliness?" "No. You grow used to this place, and eventually you grow attached to it. You wouldn't believe how this land takes hold of a man, stirring countless hidden animal instincts we never knew we possessed. At first, we become bound to it through our senses, experiencing a vague satisfaction we can't quite explain. The air and climate conquer the body against its will, and the radiant light that floods everything naturally sustains a clear and joyful state of mind. The sun pours into us in torrents, and truly, it seems to wash clean every shadowed corner of the soul. And what about women? Ah, that's the one thing that's a bit lacking. A bit. My God, yes, well, yes. After all, in any Arab tribe, there are always obliging natives ready to take care of a Rumi's nights. Rumi, the name Arabs use for Christian Europeans. He turned to the Arab who was serving us at the table, a tall, dark-skinned young man with black eyes gleaming beneath his turban, and said, "Go, Muhammad. I'll call you when I need you." Then he turned back to me. He understands French, and I want to tell you a story in which he played no small part. Once Muhammad had left, Aubal continued. This happened around my 4th year here. I hadn't yet fully settled into the country and could barely make myself understood in the local dialect. So I still made occasional trips to Algiers, since I hadn't entirely broken with the passions that had once ruined me. I bought this farm, this Borge, a former watchpost. It stands a few hundred meters from a native village, from which I hire laborers for my vineyards. Upon arrival, I took into service the strapping fellow you just saw, Mohammed ben Lamhura, from the tribe of Ulad Taja, and he soon grew deeply attached to me. Unwilling to sleep indoors as he wasn't used to a roof over his head, He pitched his tent just a few steps from my door, so I could call to him from the window whenever I needed. You can easily imagine my life. I spent my days overseeing the land and the planting, occasionally went hunting, dined with officers from nearby posts, or hosted them at mine. As for amusements, I've already told you that Algiers offered me the most refined pleasures. And sometimes, during my walks, a helpful, warm-hearted Arab would stop me and offer to bring a woman from his tribe to spend the night. Occasionally I accepted, but more often I declined, wary of the complications such arrangements might bring. One evening, early in summer, I returned from inspecting my lands and needed Muhammad for something. Instead of calling him, I went straight into his tent, as I'd done before. On a large red carpet of magnificent Jebel Amur wool, thick and soft as a feather bed, lay a woman or a girl, nearly naked, her eyes covered by one hand. Her body, dazzlingly white in the beam of light filtering through the tent's canopy, struck me as one of the most perfect creations of the Arab race I had ever seen. Women in these parts are beautiful, statuesque, remarkably well-proportioned, with facial features of astonishing symmetry. Slightly embarrassed, I lowered the flap of the tent and returned to my quarters. I adore women. That vision seared and pierced me like lightning, rekindling the old destructive fire in my veins, the very fire that had brought me here. It was July, the air was heavy, and I spent nearly the entire night at my window, my eyes fixed on Muhammad's tent, a shadowy blur in the dark. When he entered my room the next morning, I looked at him intently, and he lowered his head with a confused, guilty expression. Had he guessed that I knew everything? "So you're married, Muhammad?" I asked suddenly. He blushed and mumbled, "No, monsieur." I insisted he speak French, while I tried to learn Arabic from him. So our conversations often turned into a muddled, rather incoherent mix. I continued, "Then where did the woman come from?" He muttered, "She's from the south." "Ah, from the south. But that doesn't explain how she ended up in your tent." He didn't answer directly. "She's very beautiful," he said. "Oh, I see. Well then, next time a very beautiful woman from the south comes to visit you, be kind enough to send her to my house instead of your own." "Understood, Muhammad," he replied with utmost seriousness. "Yes, monsieur. I confess, I spent the entire day in a state of restless excitement, thinking about the Arab girl lying on the red carpet. When I returned home for dinner, I felt a powerful temptation to peek again into Muhammad's tent. That evening, he served me as usual, his face impassive, and more than once I had to restrain myself from asking how long he intended to keep that southern beauty hidden beneath his camel hair canopy. Around 9 o'clock, still under the spell of desire, persistent as a hound's hunting instinct, I stepped outside to breathe the night air and wandered around the dark cone of the tent, through whose fabric a bright point of fire glowed. Then I moved away, not wanting Muhammad to catch me loitering near his dwelling. An hour later, I returned and clearly saw his silhouette inside the tent. I took the key from my pocket and entered the Borge, where I lived with my steward, 2 French laborers, and an elderly cook hired in Algiers. Climbing the stairs, I was surprised to see a strip of light beneath my door. I opened it, and there, seated on a straw chair by the table where a candle burned, was a girl with the face of an ancient statue, adorned with countless silver trinkets like those worn by southern women on their ankles, wrists, necks, even their bellies. She seemed perfectly calm, as if she had been waiting for me. Her eyes, rimmed with kohl, were fixed on me. 4 blue star-shaped markings, delicately inked into her skin, decorated her forehead, cheeks, and chin. Her bracelet-laden hands rested on her thighs. She wore a red silk jebba that slipped from her shoulders. When I entered, she rose to her full height with a look of proud submission, her savage ornaments glittering. "What are you doing here?" I asked in Arabic. "I came because I was told to." "Who told you?" "Muhammad." "Very well. Sit down." She sat, lowering her gaze, and I stood before her, studying her. Her face was unusual, refined, symmetrical, with a sensual expression and a mysterious air, like the visage of a Buddha. Her full, vividly red lips and dark nipples hinted at a trace of African blood, though her shoulders and arms were flawlessly white. I didn't know what to do. I was stirred, confused, captivated. To buy time and gather my thoughts, I began questioning her, where she was from, how she came to be here, and what her connection was to Muhammad. But she answered only the most trivial questions, and I couldn't determine why she had come, who had sent her, or what had passed between her and my servant. I was about to say, "Go back to Muhammad's tent," when she suddenly rose, perhaps sensing my intention, lifted her bare arms, her bracelets jingling as they slid to her shoulders, and wrapped them around my neck, drawing me to her with a soft, irresistible authority. Her eyes, lit with the desire to seduce, with that feline hunger to conquer a man that gives a woman's gaze its dangerous charm, beckoned me, enslaved me, stripped me of will, and ignited a furious passion. It was a brief battle of glances, silent, fierce, the eternal struggle between two beasts in human form, male and female, in which the male is always defeated. Her arms encircled my neck, and with slow, commanding motion, inevitable as mechanical force, she drew me toward her crimson lips, parted in a sensual smile. Suddenly our mouths met, and I embraced that nearly naked body, covered in silver rings that chimed softly as they touched. She was agile and strong, like a wild animal, and in her mannerisms, her gait, the fluidity of her movements, and in that subtle, slightly spicy scent reminiscent of a gazelle, there lay a mysterious charm. Her kisses carried the taste of unknown fruits, as if plucked from a tropical forest. Soon, though perhaps dawn was already breaking, I decided it was time to let her go. I assumed she would vanish as suddenly as she had appeared, and I hadn't yet considered what might come next. But the moment she sensed my intention, she whispered, "If you send me away, where will I go in this dark hour? I'll have no choice but to lie on the bare ground. Let me sleep on the carpet at the foot of your bed." What could I say? What was I to do? It seemed to me that the prophet himself was gazing at the lit window of my room, and questions I hadn't thought to ask in the first moments of confusion now flooded my mind. "Stay," I said. "Let's talk." The decision came instantly. Since fate had thrown this girl into my arms, I would keep her, hide her in my house like a concubine, a harem slave. When she bored me, I'd find a way to be rid of her. For here on African soil, such creatures belong to us almost entirely, body and soul. I told her, "I'll be kind to you. I'll treat you gently and won't harm you. But I want to know who you are and where you came from." She understood she had to answer and told me her story, or rather, a story, for she was undoubtedly lying from beginning to end, as all Arabs do, always, for any reason or none at all. Lying is one of the most striking and inexplicable traits of the native character. These people, in whom Islam has seeped into every fiber, who have been shaped by its teachings, whose morality it has recast, whose race it has transformed beyond recognition. They lie as easily as they breathe. Falsehood is in their blood, in their bones, in their very essence. Is religion to blame? I don't know. But live among them, and you'll see. Lying has become their second nature, a necessity like bread and water. She claimed to be the daughter of a Cade from the tribe of Algeria and a woman taken from the Tuaregs during a raid. That woman, she said, was either a black slave or the offspring of mixed Arab and African blood. And as is well known, black women are prized in harems for their sensuality. Yet in her appearance, little betrayed such origins, except perhaps her vividly outlined lips and the dark nipples of her breasts, firm and elongated like springs. In this, a keen eye could not be mistaken. But in all other respects, she embodied Southern beauty, white-skinned, supple, with fine, austere features reminiscent of Indian sculptures. Her wide-set eyes gave her the look of a desert deity. Of her true life, I learned nothing. She chattered incoherently, leaping from one topic to another like a squirrel from branch to branch, recalling tents, camps, and tribes she claimed to have known. Her tale was filled with childish observations and naive details, as if invented on the spot. She spoke with the solemnity of her proud people, her face like a carved idol that had suddenly decided to speak. When she finished, I realized I had retained almost nothing from her long account, full of trivial incidents gathered in her flighty head. And I wondered, had she simply tried to fool me with this babble, from which I learned nothing about her or her past? And then I began to reflect on the people among whom we live, or rather, who live among us. We learn their language, observe their customs through the veil of the tent, impose our laws and traditions on them, and yet we know nothing about them. Absolutely nothing. As if we hadn't spent decades here, studying them day after day. We don't know what goes on in the branch hut or the tattered tent 20 paces from our door, just as we don't know what the so-called civilized Arabs do, think, or feel in the Moorish houses of Algiers. Behind whitewashed walls, behind the woven partition of a gourbi, behind the thin curtain of camel wool. They live beside us, yet remain strangers, secretive, deceitful, submissive, smiling, impenetrable. Believe me, when I peer through binoculars at the neighboring camp, I see clearly they still preserve countless rituals, superstitions, customs we neither know nor suspect. Perhaps no people conquered by force have ever so deftly evaded true subjugation, moral influence, or the persistent, yet futile, scrutiny of their conquerors. And suddenly, with startling clarity, I felt it. An invisible, insurmountable barrier had risen between me and this Arab girl, between the woman who had just surrendered to me, who had yielded to my caresses, and me, the man who had possessed her. A barrier as mysterious as nature itself, dividing races. Only then did it occur to me to ask her a simple question. What is your name? She hesitated, as if for a moment she had forgotten I existed, and I saw her body shudder slightly. From the look she raised to me, I understood. Give her one more minute, and sleep would overtake her, swift, irresistible, like everything that seizes a woman's changeable soul. Suppressing a yawn, she murmured lazily, "Allouma, are you sleepy?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "Then sleep." She lay down beside me, stretched out on her stomach, resting her forehead on her crossed arms, and I could almost feel her scattered thoughts dissolve into slumber. I lay there, lost in thought, trying to make sense of what had happened. Why had Muhammad given her to me? Was he a loyal servant, generously offering the one who had entered his tent? Or, having placed her on my bed, had he acted with a more cunning, less noble intention? When it comes to women, Arabs know how to combine stern chastity with a shameful pliancy. Their morality, rigid and yet accommodating, is as difficult to grasp as the rest of their emotions. Perhaps I had simply preempted Muhammad's intentions, stumbling into his tent before he had the chance to offer me this girl, his companion, his accomplice, perhaps even his lover. These speculations crowded my mind until they exhausted me, and I too fell into a deep sleep. I awoke to the creak of the door. Muhammad, as usual, had come to wake me. He threw open the window, and a shaft of sunlight flooded the bed where Allouma still slept. From the carpet, he picked up my trousers, vest, and jacket to brush them clean. Not once did he glance at the woman lying beside me, nor did he betray the slightest sign of surprise, not in his gait, his expression, or his gestures. But the daylight, the movement, the soft steps of bare feet, and the fresh air that swept into the room stirred Allouma from her sleep. She stretched, turned, opened her eyes, looked at me, then, with the same indifference, at Muhammad and sat up in bed. Then she muttered, "I'm hungry. What would you like?" I asked. "Kawa, coffee and bread with butter?" "Yes." Muhammad stood by the bed, holding my clothes over his arm, waiting for instructions. "Bring breakfast for Allouma and me," I said. He left without a word, showing neither surprise nor displeasure. Once he was gone, I turned to the girl. "Would you like to stay and live in my house?" "Yes, I would. I'll give you your own room and hire a woman to help you." "You are generous." "I thank you. But if you misbehave, I'll send you away. I'll do whatever you ask." She took my hand and kissed it, a gesture of submission. Muhammad returned with a tray bearing our breakfast. I said, "Allouma will stay here. Lay carpets in a room at the end of the corridor and fetch the wife of Abd el-Qadir el-Hadar. She'll attend to her." "Yes, monsieur." That was all. An hour later, the Arab beauty had already settled into a spacious, sunlit room. When I came by to see if everything was in order, she asked, with a pleading tone, if I would give her a mirrored wardrobe. I promised I would. As I left, I saw her squatting on a Jebel Amour carpet, a cigarette in the corner of her mouth, chatting animatedly with the old Arab woman I had summoned, as if they had known each other forever. For an entire month, I experienced a strange, almost serene happiness in her presence. Without realizing it, I had grown attached to this being of another race, who seemed to me a creature of a different species, born on some distant, foreign planet. No, I did not love her. It is impossible to love the daughters of this primal land. Between us and them, even between them and the men of their own tribe, the delicate blue flower that blooms in northern countries never blossoms. These women carry too much of the animal within them. Their souls are still dormant, their emotions too undeveloped to awaken in us that sentimental tremor from which the poetry of love is born. There is no spiritual impulse, no intoxication of thought, only physical desire, stirred by their enchanting but hollow beauty. And yet, they know how to hold us in their power. They entangle us, as all women do, but differently, not with painful tenacity, not with cruel persistence. The feeling I had for Allouma, even now, I cannot define. As I've already told you, this bare Africa, a land without art, without spiritual pleasures, conquers us physically with the caress of its air, the play of its light, the charm of its dawns and dusks, the soothing effect on all our senses. Allouma captivated me in the same way, not with passion, not with love, but with a multitude of subtle, almost invisible charms, with the lazy Eastern languor of her embrace, her submissive tenderness. I gave her complete freedom. She could come and go as she pleased, and nearly every other day she spent the afternoon in the nearby Dur, among the wives of my native workers. Often, she would spend entire days admiring herself in the mirror of the redwood wardrobe I had brought from Miliana. Without the slightest embarrassment, she would gaze at her reflection, studying every movement with serious, almost scientific concentration. She would walk, tilting her head slightly to better see the curve of her hips and waist, turn, step back, approach again, and then, tired, settle onto the cushions opposite the mirror, her eyes fixed on it, her face stern, immersed in self-contemplation. Over time, I noticed that she disappeared almost every day after breakfast and didn't return until evening. Mildly concerned, I asked Muhammad if he knew where she went. He replied calmly, "Don't worry, monsieur. Ramadan is near. She's probably going to pray." He, too, seemed pleased that Allouma lived with us. But I never saw anything suspicious between them. No secret glances, no conspiracies, no attempts to hide anything. I accepted it all as it was, without probing, leaving it to time, to chance, to life itself. Often, after inspecting my vineyards and fields, I would go for long walks. You know these Algerian forests, dense, nearly impassable ravines where fallen cedars block the flow of mountain streams, narrow valleys overgrown with oleanders that, from above, resemble eastern carpets spread along the riverbanks. You know that in the most remote places where it seems no human foot has ever stepped, one can stumble upon the snow-white dome of a Kuba, a modest shrine built over the grave of a revered Marabout. These tombs are rarely visited, except by the most devout believers who come from neighboring Durs with a candle to light at the holy site. One evening, returning home, I passed by one such shrine. Peeking through the half-open door, I saw a woman praying before the sacred place. It was a strikingly beautiful scene. An Arab woman seated on the ground in the abandoned chapel, where the wind roamed freely, sweeping golden piles of pine needles into the corners. I stepped closer to see her more clearly and recognized Allouma. She hadn't noticed me, hadn't heard my steps. She was entirely absorbed in prayer. She whispered to the saint, as if speaking to him, confiding her worries. At times she fell silent, as if thinking over what else to say, so as not to forget anything. Then, suddenly, she would grow animated, as though he were answering her, advising her, and she would argue, offering her own reasoning. I withdrew as quietly as I had come and returned home for dinner. That evening, I sent for her. She entered with a troubled expression, something quite uncharacteristic of her. "Sit here," I said, pointing to the spot beside me on the divan. She sat down, but when I leaned in to kiss her, she quickly pulled away. I was surprised. "What's the matter?" "Why, it's Ramadan," she replied. I laughed. "The Marabout forbade you to kiss during the fast?" "Oh, yes. I'm an Arab woman, and you're a Rumi. Is it considered a serious sin?" "A very serious one. So you haven't eaten all day until sunset?" "Not a thing. And after sunset, I ate. But night has already fallen, and you allow yourself to eat. Why not be less strict in other things as well?" Her expression changed abruptly. Irritation, even offense, flickered in her eyes. With a haughty pride I had never seen in her before, she replied, "If an Arab girl lets a Rumi touch her during Ramadan, she will be cursed forever. And you intend to keep this up for the whole month?" "Yes, all of Ramadan," she said with firm conviction. I pretended to be angry. "Well then, Go celebrate Ramadan with your relatives. She seized my hands and pressed them to her chest. Please don't be angry. You'll see how sweet I'll be. Shall we celebrate Ramadan together? I'll take care of you. Please, you just don't be angry. She was so touchingly upset that I couldn't help but smile and sent her off to sleep. An hour passed. I was about to go to bed when I heard two faint knocks at the door. Come in, I called. Allouma appeared, carrying a large tray piled high with Arab sweets. Sugar-coated balls, pastries fried in oil, cookies, a whole mountain of exotic delicacies. She laughed, flashing her brilliant white teeth, and repeated, We'll celebrate Ramadan together. You know that among Arabs, the fast lasts from sunrise until nightfall, until the moment when the eye can no longer distinguish the white thread from the black. Each evening ends with a small feast among family, and the celebration often stretches until dawn. For those who don't strictly follow the rules, Ramadan becomes a reversal of day and night. But Allouma was far more devout in her piety. She placed the tray between us on the divan, picked up a sugar-dusted ball with her slender fingers, and whispered, It's delicious, try it, then placed it in my mouth. I bit into the light pastry. It truly was exquisite. You made all this yourself? I asked. Yes, myself. For me? For you. To reconcile me with Ramadan? Yes. Don't be angry. I'll treat you like this every evening. Oh, what a month it was. A month of sweetness, cloying and unbearable. A month of tender attentions and temptations, of bursts of fury and futile attempts to break her unwavering resistance. Then came the 3 days of Bahram, the festival that ends Ramadan. I celebrated them in my own way, and the fast was forgotten. The summer was scorching. As autumn approached, I noticed that Allouma had grown distracted, preoccupied, as if detached from everything. One evening, when I sent for her, she wasn't in her room. I assumed she was wandering somewhere in the house and ordered her to be found. But she didn't appear. I flung open the window and called out, Muhammad! A sleepy voice answered from the tent. Yes, monsieur. Do you know where Allouma is? No, monsieur. Has Allouma disappeared? A minute later, he rushed into my room, visibly alarmed, unable to hide his concern. Allouma has disappeared? Yes, she's gone. That's impossible. Find her, I said. He froze, thinking, then dashed into her empty room. Her clothes lay scattered in the usual Eastern disarray. He examined everything like a detective, or rather like a dog sniffing for a trail. Finally, exhausted, he murmured with resignation, She's gone, truly gone. I feared something terrible had happened. Perhaps she had fallen into a ravine, injured herself. I roused the entire settlement, ordering them to search until she was found. They searched all night, searched the next day, searched for a week. But not a trace. I was desolate. I missed her. The house felt empty, life meaningless. Troubling thoughts plagued me. Had she been kidnapped, perhaps even killed? But whenever I shared my fears with Muhammad, he always replied, No, she left. And he would add, Riesel, gazelle, as if to say, Allouma is swift and she is far away. 3 weeks passed. I had resigned myself to never seeing her again. And then, one early morning, Muhammad entered, his face glowing with joy. Monsieur, Allouma has returned. I leapt from the bed and cried out, Where is she? She's afraid to come in. Over there, under the tree. He pointed through the window at a pale shape lying at the foot of the olive tree. I dressed quickly and went outside. As I approached the bundle of rags abandoned at the base of the trunk, I recognized her. The large dark eyes, the stars tattooed on her temples, the elongated, symmetrical face of the wild creature who had once enchanted me. The closer I came, the more my anger flared. I wanted to strike her, to hurt her, to take revenge. I shouted from a distance, "Where did you come from?" She said nothing, sat motionless, indifferent, as if life barely flickered within her, ready to endure my fury, waiting submissively for the blow. I drew closer and was appalled by her appearance. Scraps of silk and wool, gray with dust, torn, filthy to the point of revulsion. I repeated, raising my hand as one might to a stray dog, "Where did you come from?" She whispered, "From there." "From where?" "From a tribe." "Which tribe?" "Mine." "Why did you leave me?" Realizing I wasn't going to strike her, she grew a little bolder and said softly, "I had to. I couldn't live in the house anymore." I saw tears in her eyes and, like a fool, was suddenly moved. I bent down to sit beside her and noticed Muhammad watching us from afar. I asked gently, "Tell me, why did you leave?" And she told me that a deep longing for the nomadic life had been stirring in her soul for a long time, for tents, for running across sand, for wandering with herds across the plains. She wanted once again to sleep beneath a thin canopy, between the yellow stars of the sky and the blue stars tattooed on her face, with no roof, no walls, only the heavens shining through worn fabric. She spoke simply, naively, but with such sincerity that I believed her. I was touched and asked, "Why didn't you tell me you wanted to leave for a while? You wouldn't have let me. If you'd promised to come back, I would have. You wouldn't have believed me." Seeing that I wasn't angry, she laughed and added, "You see, it's over now. I've come home. I only needed a few days. It's all behind me. I'm well again. I'm happy. You're kind. Let's go home," I said. She rose. I took her hand, narrow with slender fingers. Proudly, her rings, bracelets, and coins jingling, she walked with dignity in her rags toward the house, where Muhammad was already waiting. Before entering, I said, "Allouma, if ever you want to return to your people again, just tell me, and I'll let you go." She asked hesitantly, "You promise?" "I promise. And I promise too." When it becomes too heavy here, she placed her hands to her forehead. I'll say, "I need to go there," and you'll let me. I led her to her room. Muhammad followed with a jug of water. The wife of Abd el-Qadir el-Hadar hadn't yet been informed that her mistress had returned. Upon entering, Allouma saw the mirrored wardrobe and rushed to it with a radiant face, like a child to its mother after a long separation. She studied her reflection for a few seconds, made a face, and said crossly, "Wait, I have still dresses in the wardrobe. I'll be beautiful again in a moment." I left her alone with the mirror. Our life resumed as before. I found myself increasingly drawn to the strange, purely physical charm of this girl, while at the same time feeling something paternal, protective toward her. For 6 months, everything was calm. Then I noticed she had grown restless again, agitated, a little melancholy. One day I asked, "Do you want to go back to your people?" "Yes, I do." "You didn't dare tell me?" "I didn't dare." "Go. I give you permission." She took my hands and kissed them, as she always did in moments of gratitude. And the next morning, she was gone. She returned, just as before, 3 weeks later, dusty, sun-darkened, ragged, sated with freedom and sand. Over 2 years, she left like this 4 times. I welcomed her back each time with joy, without jealousy. For jealousy, as I understand it, is born only of the kind of love we know in our homeland. Of course, I could have killed her if I had discovered betrayal. as one kills a disobedient dog in a fit of rage. But I would not have felt the torment, the burning anguish, the torture that jealousy brings in the north. Yes, I said, I would have killed her like a dog, because I loved her as one loves a rare animal, a dog or a horse, to which one becomes deeply attached. She was a magnificent beast, sensual, made for pleasure, with the body of a woman. I could never truly explain the vast, bottomless gulf that lay between our souls, even though at times our hearts beat in unison and warmed one another. She had become part of my daily life, my routine, a familiar indulgence to which I was bound, not by spirit, but by flesh, sensually, physically. One morning, Muhammad entered with an unusual expression, that restless, darting look Arabs get when they're disturbed, like a cat that spotted a dog. Seeing his face, I asked, "Well, what's happened?" "Allouma is gone." I laughed. "Gone? Where to?" "Truly gone, monsieur." "What do you mean, truly?" "Yes, monsieur. You've lost your mind, my dear fellow." "No, monsieur." "Why did she leave?" "How?" "Come on, explain it properly." He stood motionless, unwilling to speak. Then suddenly, one of those fits of Eastern fury overtook him, when the reserved dignity of an Arab gives way to wild gesticulation and desperate cries, like a street quarrel erupting in full force. From his scattered outbursts, I gathered one thing. Allouma had run off with my shepherd. I had to calm Muhammad and extract the details piece by piece. It wasn't easy, but eventually I learned that he had been watching her for a week. She had been slipping away to the Cactus Grove or the Oleander Valley to meet a vagabond, a man my steward had recently hired to tend the livestock. Last night, Muhammad saw her leave the house, and she never returned. He kept repeating, beside himself, "She's gone, monsieur, gone." I don't know why, but his certainty immediately became mine. I felt it was true, absurd, ridiculous, but undeniable. After all, recklessness is the only logic women follow. My heart clenched, my blood boiled. I tried to picture the man, and remembered seeing him the previous week, standing on a hill among his herd, watching me. A tall Bedouin, his skin sun-darkened like his rags, a savage face, sharp cheekbones, hooked nose, a cut chin, sinewy legs lean, ragged with the eyes of a jackal. I no longer doubted it. Yes, she had gone with him. Why? Because she was Allouma, child of the sands. And in Paris, some daughter of the pavement would have run off with my coachman or a street drifter. Well then, I said to Muhammad, if she's gone, so much the worse for her. I have letters to write. Leave me. He left, surprised by my calm. I walked to the window, flung it open, and drew in a deep breath of the hot southern wind. The sirocco was blowing, and I thought, my God, she's just a woman, like any other. Do we ever truly know why they do what they do? What drives them to love, to leave, to return? Sometimes we guess, but more often we don't. Why did she go off with that pitiful creature? Why? Perhaps simply because the wind had been blowing from the south almost every day for a month. That's enough. One breath of wind. A woman doesn't know, doesn't understand, not even the most refined among them, why she acts one way and not another. She's like a weather vane turning with the breeze, a faint current of air, and the arrow of copper, iron, wood, or tin begins to spin. So too does a woman's heart, whether she's from the city, the village, the suburbs, or the desert, responding to an imperceptible impression, a fleeting touch, a passing impulse. Later, they may understand, if they're capable of reflection, why they acted as they did. But in the moment, they don't know, because they are slaves to their whims, their accidents, their circumstances, their encounters, their sensations, to whatever stirs their soul and body. Monsieur Obal stood up, paced the room, looked at me, and said with a wry smile, "That's love in the desert." I asked, "And if Allouma comes back?" He muttered, "Wretched girl, but you know I'd still be glad." "And you'd forgive her the shepherd?" "My dear fellow, of course. With women, you either forgive or pretend nothing ever happened."